Well, I wasn't the only one bumming out about this. Florida Republican Congressman West was too. And Congressman, I know from a state, of course, that brought us so many great and wonderful memories. Your great state and Texas, Houston Control, and on and on and on. This was a sad day, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so, because, Neil, when you think about American exceptionalism, the uniqueness of us as a people, the fact that we were challenged by leadership such as John F. Kennedy, who was president at the time, to put a man on the moon, and we answered that challenge. So I think that what you see now is really a sad day for America and, of course, the Space Coast down in Florida, because it's almost as if we're not challenging ourselves to reach for the stars. And I think we also, from a national security perspective, have to understand that the next and new dimension in this 21st century battlefield is outer space and the dominance of the cyber arena.
Did it strike you as odd, Congressman, that more people were fixated on this ongoing saga getting this shuttlecraft from Washington to New York than they were, save some tragic launches, any that we had seen in the great space days?
Well, I think that people were still focused on the launches. Of course, when we had the one shuttle that landed here in Washington, D.C., it made several loops around the Capitol area, and a lot of the staff here wanted to catch a glimpse of that. And the sad thing is that for many of them, maybe they thought that this was the last time that they'd be able to see that space shuttle traveling across the air, even though it was a piggyback on 747. So again, we have to not assume this position of leading from behind and thumbing for a ride. That's not what Americans do. We are pace setters. We are the ones who always lead from the front. And I think that if we can restore that type of leadership to this country, and when I was a battalion commander, I didn't ever challenge my unit to do less. I always challenged the unit to do more, and I think that they took pride in that.
You know, Congressman, you mentioned John F. Kennedy when he staked out the goal of landing a man on the moon before the decade was out, and many people thought he should be on the moon for such an audacious goal at the time. But that was then when we had little surpluses. This is now when we don't have anything of the sort. So our options are few to non-existent. What do you make of that argument that, sure, it's a great goal to be looking to space, but there's nothing in the cupboard to pay for it?
Well, I think one of the most important things, it comes back to leadership. And it comes back to leadership that has a vision, and that's what John F. Kennedy has. And we need to have leadership in this country right now that understands our economic security, our energy security, and national security. And
but Kennedy linked that, right? I mean, truth be told,
that's what I
he
just
was
did.
Driven by the fact that the Soviets at the time had leapt ahead of us here, and it was as much a military as it was a technological goal to write it, right?
You're absolutely right, and that's why I say those three things are the three pillars of our security: economic, energy, and national security, and they are all linked together. And if we did have our economic situation a lot tighter, where we don't have $15.6 trillion in debt and really no way ahead and no future that looks at reducing that debt and reducing these deficits that we have, it will affect our energy security, and it will eventually affect our national security. And as I said, us sitting here and thumbing rides from Russia, or watching China start to exceed us as far as having a stronger Navy and strategic Air Force, and also looking to be more dominant in the arena of cyber, that's not what America should be focused on. But we need to have the right type of focused, visionary leadership that, first of all, gets this federal government to be more fiscally responsible.
You know, it's interesting, Congressman. I was looking at the initial budget request to Kennedy for the space program, and I think the first one was $1.6 billion. It eventually got up to $4 billion, or that's what he committed before he was assassinated. And I'm thinking, $4 billion, that's
what we spend
a day. Right, exactly.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The argument is, unless there's a big picture or a big goal or a big cause, this ain't going to happen. And therein lies the rub, right? I mean, what do we have to do to make that a purposeful goal? In other words, one where we can see a bang for the buck. Because a lot of people in this environment say, well, it's just going to be another green energy type debacle. It's going to be another cylinder debacle. And a lot of Americans are the notion, look, once burnt, more than twice shine.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. Oh, I mean, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And that's why I think it's so important that we get the right type of leadership up here in Washington, D.C. We don't have a strategic roadmap for this country as far as our economy. We don't have a strategic roadmap as far as our energy security. Think about almost 40 years ago, we created a Department of Energy to make us energy independent, and we still aren't there yet. But yet we continue to waste billions upon billions and now trillions of dollars really chasing our tail. And that's where you need to have principled, pragmatic leadership and voices up here in Washington, D.C. And Neil, it's very simple. The American people have a choice between two futures coming up here in November. They can continue down the path of being a social, egalitarian, welfare nanny state, or we can get back to, once again, dreaming big dreams for this country and making sure we create the right type of opportunities for future generations.
Now, you guys have vacation coming up, I guess, by that man.
I never have a vacation, my friend.
All right. Well, bottom line, $56 billion deeper in debt while you guys are out. So now we know, of course, people have told me apparently this is an election year. So nothing's going to get done certainly through the election. So a lot of these issues that are backing up like rockets ready to launch don't launch until maybe a lame duck session of Congress. So do a lot of the tough issues like resolving what happens to these Bush tax rates, what happens to these payroll tax cuts, what happens to the alternative minimum tax, what happens to all of this stuff, all expiring at the end of the year. Is that when it gets done, in a lame duck session?
Well, unfortunately, it looks like that's the path we're heading on. If you remember, there was a young Florida member of Congress who hadn't even been sworn in that sent a letter up to the leadership talking about how he didn't believe that the calendar had us working toward accomplishing those big goals. And I think that that is one of the reasons why you see a low approval rating for us, because we're not spending the time up here to tackle these problems and situations, especially as far as our economy. When you look at the fact that we could have the largest tax increase that the American people have ever seen next January if we don't start working to do something to provide the certainty. But when you're sitting up here in Washington, D.C., Neil, and you're passing budgets on the House side, but you have a Senate that has not passed a budget in 3 years, you don't have a willing partner. And that's what we need more than anything else, is a willing partner so that we can tackle these big issues and not sit back and talk about electioneering.
All right, Congressman, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Neil.
I empathize for your end of space era reviews. I hope we're both wrong on that, Congressman. Thank you.
Well, if it's up to me, we're going to restore those programs that are necessary to provide the exceptionalism of this country.
Well, it was nice when we had it. Thank you, sir.